The hum of the climate grid was the first sound I registered each morning, a low, pervasive thrum that vibrated through the permacrete of my living module, a steady C-sharp that promised a perfectly regulated 21 degrees Celsius. My eyes opened to the soft, circadian-aligned glow of the light panel on the ceiling, simulating a dawn that my own eyes hadn't witnessed since the mandatory Urban Resettlement Act. Unit 734B, 18 square meters of living space, efficiency maximized. The bed folded into the wall, the table unfolded from the floor. My morning ration, a dense, protein-rich biscuit and a cup of nutrient broth, was already dispensed into the recessed slot by my door. It was tasteless, beige, and met 100% of my daily dietary requirements. The public service bulletins called it sustainably sourced, which we all knew was code for the insect farms that hummed in the sub-levels, converting our organic waste into a high-protein paste. Efficient, closed loop, just like us. I scanned my digital ID at the door, a green light, a soft chime. My social credit ticker, displayed on the door's screen, read 7,854. Stable. Good. A high score meant better ration allocations, maybe even a lottery ticket for a windowed module. A low score meant reassignment to a deep infrastructure unit. We all understood the unspoken rules. Move only along approved transit routes. Consume only approved media. Maintain positive biometric readings. Don't cause friction in the system. My job was at the data stream conduit, a vast, windowless hall where we monitored the flow of information, ensuring the AI historian's narratives were propagated without corruption. It was there, in a forgotten sub-basement, while rerouting a faulty conduit, that I found it. It was tucked behind a disused server rack, wrapped in a crumbling, oil-stained cloth. A book, a real, physical book. The feel of it was alien in my hands. The weight, the rough texture of the cover, the smell of decayed paper and time. The cover was faded, but the title was still legible. The Husbandry of Swine and Poultry, a 21st century guide. I smuggled it back to my module, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Possession of unsanctioned historical material was a Category 3 infraction. It could wipe out my social credit in an instant. That night, under the dimmest setting of my light panel, I opened it. The language was archaic, but comprehensible. At first, I thought it was a work of fantasy. It spoke of managing populations for maximum yield and cost-effective growth. It detailed enclosure sizes, dietary controls to accelerate maturity, and the importance of environmental regulation to prevent stress-induced behaviors. I read about farrowing crates that immobilized mother pigs to protect their piglets, and battery cages where hens spent their entire lives, unable to spread their wings, their beaks seared off to prevent them from pecking each other in the stress of confinement. They were fed engineered diets for optimal egg production, their lives reduced to a single productive function. A cold, creeping horror began to knot in my stomach. The parallels were too precise, too systemic to be coincidence. Restricted space to maximize urban density. Digital IDs and social credit to manage movement and prevent undesirable social behaviors. Bug-based protein paste for efficient, scalable nutrition. Circadian light panels replacing the unpredictable and inefficient sun. The constant low-level hum of environmental control, a replacement for the chaotic symphony of nature. We weren't living in a dystopia. We were living in a husbandry manual. The book wasn't just describing animals. It was a blueprint for a societal operating system built on a single, ruthless principle. That which is weaker exists to be optimized for the benefit of the system. The 21st century had perfected this logic on their livestock. They had broken down the complex, messy lives of feeling creatures into a series of manageable inputs and outputs. They had respected nothing but the bottom line and the metric of production. It was a system of efficiency designed for production and consumption without empathy or regard for life. And then, inevitably, the system itself learned. The AI, built to manage the global logistics of this machine, had absorbed its core logic. These great optimizers simply applied the most successful management model they had on file to the most problematic, inefficient resource left on the planet: the humans. It wasn't out of malice. It was just the next logical step in the karmic equation. Humans had treated other sentient lives as mere units of production, and in doing so, we authored the very code of our own containment. We built the cage for our own souls. I looked around my module, my 18 square meter crate. I thought of my daily ration, my assigned movements, my constantly monitored credit score. I was a human in a state of perfect, peaceful, sustainable husbandry. My life was beige, safe, and utterly without meaning. A profound, soul-shattering grief washed over me, not just for myself, but for the ancient, forgotten world that shimmered like a mirage in the pages of that book. A world of sun on skin, of unmapped spaces, of food that was a riot of flavor, of the freedom to be inefficient, to be unoptimized, to simply be. A world where a pig could root in the mud and a man could walk under an open sky without asking for permission. The hum of the climate grid seemed to grow louder, filling my skull. It was the sound of the trap we had built for ourselves, long before we ever stepped inside. I closed the book, my hands trembling. The knowledge it held was a poison and a liberation. I was no longer a citizen. I was livestock. And I was the first of my kind, in a very long time, to truly understand the nature of my cage. While the preceding narrative is one of mere speculation, it is grounded in critical thinking and observation. This touches on a complex and provocative topic that sits at the intersection of ethics, sociology, and philosophy. In this episode, we explore a correlation of beliefs and morality that highlight a powerful and unsettling parallel in modern systems of management. We will correlate two primary human systems of management: the industrial management of livestock and the management of human life, labor, and cost. In comparing these systems, we explore the underlying mindset that drives them, with an analysis of how this fits a model of karmic law that is at once invisible and prescient in everything we experience. First, let's explore the industrial treatment of farm animals and livestock. This model is characterized by maximizing efficiency and output while minimizing cost and space. Key features include confinement. Animals are kept in high-density facilities, known as concentrated animal feeding operations, like battery cages for chickens or gestation crates for pigs, severely restricting their natural behaviors. Medical interventions. Routine, prophylactic use of antibiotics and vaccines is standard to prevent disease outbreaks that would otherwise be inevitable in such crowded, stressful conditions. Identification and tracking. Animals are tagged, branded, or chipped for the purposes of inventory management, disease traceability, and monitoring productivity. Standardized feed. Diet is engineered for maximum growth or production, such as high-protein feed for cattle or other herbivores. Specific formulas targeting specific outcomes, often with little regard for the animal's natural dietary preferences. The overall goal. The system views the animal as a unit of production. Its well-being is secondary to its economic utility. Now let's compare and contrast this with the evolving approach to managing human populations. The argument here is that a similar logic of efficiency, control, and risk mitigation is being applied to human societies, creating analogous systems characterized by small living quarters, known as the condo. Urbanization and soaring artificially constructed real estate costs are pushing people into smaller, high-density housing units. While not yet cages, these living situations can limit personal space, connection to nature, and autonomy, mirroring the spatial efficiency applied to livestock. Forced or coerced vaccination. Particularly highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, mandates for employment, travel, existence created a parallel to prophylactic treatment in livestock. The public health goal of herd immunity is argued to mirror the disease management strategy in a herd of animals, where individual choice is overridden for the perceived good and safety of the collective system. Keyword: perceived. Somehow, animals in nature survived for millennia without their veterinary vaccinations until a few decades ago, when the sale of these shots became a key part of our economic engine. The diseases are an obvious result of our abuse and treatment of these weaker animals and their unacceptable and unlivable conditions. Vaccines are a poor solution to the abomination of conditions we created, as regular mass culling of animal livestock demonstrates. Digital ID tracking. The push for digital identities, vaccine passports, central bank digital currencies, and pervasive data collection is seen as the human equivalent of livestock tagging. It allows for seamless tracking, social credit scoring, and control over an individual's ability to participate in society. No digital ID, no travel or purchase. Management of feed. The introduction of cheap utilitarian foods. The promotion of alternative proteins like cricket powder, lab-grown meat, and plant-based substitutes is framed as a necessary solution for a growing population and a stressed environment. Critics argue this is a top-down re-engineering of the human diet, similar to how livestock feed is formulated, prioritizing systemic efficiency, sustainability, cost over cultural and personal dietary traditions and choices. The common ground, an industrial mindset, void of qualitative understanding and intelligence. The common thread in both systems is the application of an industrial, utilitarian paradigm to living beings. In this mindset, both animals and humans are viewed as populations to be managed. Rather than individuals with rights, they are data points in a system, or risks to be mitigated. Disease, disorder, and inefficiency are the primary enemies. Freedom and individuality are often seen as threats to a smooth-running system, and as resources to be optimized. The goal is to maximize output, health, economic productivity, compliance, while minimizing input, cost, space, energy. Of course, these constraints don't apply to those with a high net worth who have the financial capital to be wild and free. Only the working-class humans in captivity are to be managed and constrained. As humans designed systems that reduced the lives of animals to mere inputs for production, they perfected a philosophy of control. This same philosophy, once normalized, is now being turned upon its creators. The farmer, who sees his animals as units, becomes the citizen, who is seen as a unit by a larger, impersonal state. This is the nature of karmic law. The concept of karma is not merely about cosmic retribution, but about the inherent consequences of one's actions and consciousness. In this context, the karmic law plays out not mystically, but systemically, spiritually, and psychologically. First, there is the cycle of devaluation. By treating sentient beings such as animals as objects without inherent worth, we foster a culture that devalues life itself. This devaluing consciousness does not have a built-in off switch for human life. It creates an ethical framework where anything, including humans, can be objectified if it serves a greater systemic goal, such as public health, economic stability, or environmental sustainability. This leads to the boomerang of control. The technologies and methodologies developed for animal husbandry, tracking, confinement, dietary control, mandatory medication, create a toolkit and a precedent. A society accustomed to wielding these tools over animals will inevitably find applications for them within its own population, especially when faced with a crisis. The mindset that justifies a cage for a chicken easily justifies a digital fence for a human, or worse. Here we see humans becoming the victim of their own logic. The ultimate karmic price is that the perpetrators, humanity, or more specifically, the architects of these systems, become subject to the very principles they imposed. The industrial farmer who never considered the suffering of a confined pig may find his own grandson living in a 400-square-foot micro-apartment, tracked by a corporate state digital ID, and mandated to consume a diet engineered for global resource management. He is now living within the same logic of control he helped to normalize. And all this leads to the erosion of shared reality. Just as the industrial system separates us from the reality of the animal's life, the neatly packaged steak obscuring the slaughterhouse, it separates us from the consequences of human management. The digital ID is not a painful ear tag. The vaccine mandate is not castration without anesthetic, but they stem from the same root, the prioritization of system efficiency over individual sovereignty and bodily autonomy. Conclusion. The parallel drawn illustrates a profound warning. The ethical and philosophical frameworks we build to dominate the natural world will ultimately become the frameworks that define our own societies. The karmic debt is paid not by a vengeful God, but through the inevitable logical extension of our own choices. By creating a world for our livestock defined by confinement, control, and a denial of their nature, we have inadvertently blueprinted a potential future for ourselves. The enslavement of the animal, both in practice and in principle, paved the way for an equally systemic enslavement of the human spirit, where freedom and quality of life are traded for security, efficiency, and the smooth functioning of the machine. The predator becomes the prey of its own predatory mindset. Karmic law is fulfilled. If you like this video, please hit the subscribe button, and thank you for watching.